Quick test. I'm going to say 3 words, and I want you to see what happens in your brain. Ready? Look up. Look way up. Did you hear a voice? See a castle? Feel something? How about this? Skinamarink. Or this. Maybe tomorrow I'll want to settle down. If any of those triggered a memory, congratulations. You're Canadian, and you grew up in the golden age of Canadian children's television. Today, we're counting down 10 shows that every Canadian kid watched, and I'm willing to bet you watched at least 7 of them. Let's see if I'm right. This is part 5 of our series, and we're going deep into the shows that shaped Canadian childhood. Let's start with Fred Penner's Place, which ran on CBC from 1985 to 1997. Every episode started the same way. Fred Penner would walk through the woods, find a hollow log, and crawl through it into a magical place where he'd sing songs, tell stories, and just hang out with kids. The show was pure wholesomeness. Fred had this gentle, genuine warmth that made you feel like he was actually your friend. He played guitar, sang folk songs, and treated every kid watching like they mattered. The theme of the show was simple: curiosity, kindness, and the joy of discovery. There were no villains, no conflict, just Fred and his songs and the woods. And here's the thing. Fred Penner is still performing today. He's a Canadian icon, and an entire generation of kids grew up feeling like Fred was their buddy. If you crawled through that log with Fred Penner, you know, this show was special. This show ran from 1984 to 1988 on CBC, but its impact lasted way longer. Sharon, Lois, and Bram were already famous Canadian children's musicians, and this show brought their music to life. The format was simple: songs, puppets, stories, and tons of energy. They'd sing everything from traditional folk songs to original compositions. And if you grew up in the 80s or 90s in Canada, you sang along. The most iconic song? Skinamarink. Skinamarink-a-dink-a-dink, skinamarink-a-doo, I love you. If you just sang that in your head or out loud, you watched The Elephant Show. That song has been stuck in the heads of Canadians for 40 years. Parents sing it to their kids. Teachers use it in classrooms. It's embedded in our DNA. The show also featured Elephant, a life-sized elephant puppet who was the 4th member of the group. Elephant didn't talk, but kids loved him anyway. Sharon, Lois, and Bram made music fun, accessible, and joyful. And for millions of Canadian kids, they were the soundtrack to childhood. This CBC show ran from 1986 to 1993 and featured Holly, a human woman living with 3 puppets: Iggy the iguana, Jacob the blue jay, and Gloria the gopher. The setup was simple. They all lived together in a house, and each episode dealt with everyday problems: sharing, jealousy, misunderstandings, friendship. It was slice-of-life storytelling with puppets. What made it work was the characters. Iggy was enthusiastic and naive. Jacob was intellectual and a bit sarcastic. Gloria was practical and caring, and Holly tied it all together as the calm, patient adult. The show taught kids about emotions and relationships without being preachy. Problems didn't always get solved perfectly, and that honesty made it feel real. The theme song is still stuck in people's heads. Under the Umbrella Tree, it was catchy, simple, and perfectly captured the cozy vibe of the show. Under the Umbrella Tree wasn't flashy or loud. It was just a gentle, thoughtful show about living together and figuring things out. And for a lot of Canadian kids, it felt like home. This show ran on CTV from 1979 to 1985, and if you're Canadian, you know the theme song. Maybe tomorrow I'll want to settle down. Until tomorrow, I'll just keep moving on. Time, he'd choose to leave. And every single time, we'd cry. The show wasn't just about a smart dog. It was about freedom, independence, and the bittersweet nature of letting go. It taught kids that sometimes love means not holding on. The Littlest Hobo ran for 6 seasons and 114 episodes, and it became a cultural touchstone. That theme song is still one of the most recognizable TV themes in Canadian history. If that ending ever made you cry, and it absolutely did, you know this show was special. This animated series ran from 1985 to 1991 and was one of the biggest Canadian cartoons of the 80s. The show followed Bert Raccoon, Ralph Raccoon, Melissa Raccoon, and their friends in the evergreen forest as they battled against Cyril Sneer, a greedy aardvark industrialist who wanted to destroy the forest for profit. The Raccoons was ahead of its time. It dealt with environmentalism, corporate greed, and the importance of protecting nature. Heavy themes for a kid's cartoon. But it never felt preachy. It was funny, adventurous, and genuinely entertaining. Cyril Sneer is one of the great Canadian cartoon villains. He was greedy and selfish, but he wasn't one-dimensional. The show gave him depth, and sometimes he even did the right thing. The theme song, Run With Us, is still beloved. It's an earworm that defined 80s cartoon intros. The Raccoons aired in over 180 countries and was a massive international success. But somehow, it's been largely forgotten today. Younger generations have no idea it exists. If you remember Cyril Sneer and the Evergreen Forest, you watched one of Canada's greatest cartoon exports. This TVO show ran from 1981 to 1987, and it had one of the weirdest premises in Canadian TV history. The show took place in a department store after hours. Jeff was a mannequin who came to life at night when Jody, a display designer, put a magic hat on him and said the magic words, Hocus Pocus Alamagocus. Once alive, Jeff would explore the store with Jody, Muffy the mouse, a puppet, and Sam the security guard. Each episode had a theme, friendship, honesty, courage, and they'd explore it through songs and stories. The show was bizarre. A mannequin coming to life, a talking mouse, a department store as the setting. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. Kids loved Jeff's childlike wonder at the world. They loved Muffy's sass. They loved the songs and the gentle lessons. Today's special became a cult classic. It's one of those shows that people either remember vividly or have never heard of. There's no in between. If you remember the magic words, Hocus Pocus Alamagocus, you're part of the cult. Welcome. This Ottawa-produced show ran from 1979 to 1990 and changed kids' TV forever. The format was sketch comedy, kids and adults performing funny sketches. But what made it revolutionary was the attitude. This show made fun of parents, teachers, and authority figures. It was gross, subversive, and hilarious. And then there was the slime. The rule was simple. Say, I don't know, and green slime gets dumped on your head. Say water, and you get drenched. These weren't just gags. They became iconic. Nickelodeon picked up the show in 1981, and it became one of their first hits. The green slime became Nickelodeon's entire brand identity. Every time you've seen someone get slimed in the last 40 years, it traces back to this Ottawa show. The cast included a young Alanis Morissette, years before she became a music superstar. If you remember Barth's Burgers or the Firing Squad sketches, you know. This show was legendary. This TVO show ran from 1971 to 1993, and if you grew up in Ontario, this was your show. The format was simple. Two hosts would explore a theme each episode: colors, shapes, animals, emotions, through songs, stories, and activities. It was educational but never felt like school. The show featured several iconic characters. Bear was a quiet, gentle puppet. Marigold was curious and energetic. Humpty and Dumpty were twin characters who got into mischief. But the most famous character? Polkaroo. Polkaroo was a tall, polka-dotted dinosaur-like creature who would show up randomly during episodes. The running gag was that one host would always just miss seeing Polkaroo, leading to the iconic line, "I always miss the Polkaroo." Polkaroo became a cultural phenomenon. Kids would debate whether Polkaroo was real. Parents would laugh at the absurdity of it all. Polka Dot Door was gentle, educational, and deeply nostalgic. It represented a particular era of Canadian children's programming, low budget, earnest, and effective. If you missed the Polkaroo, you know. This show was childhood. This CBC show ran from 1967 to 1996, 29 years of pure creativity and kindness. Ernie Coombs was Mr. Dressup, and every episode followed the same comforting format. He'd arrive, greet the audience, and then open the tickle trunk, a magical wooden chest filled with costumes and props. Whatever came out of the tickle trunk would spark an adventure. A pirate hat? Time to be a pirate. A chef's apron? Let's cook. A space helmet? Off to the moon. Mr. Dressup was joined by Casey and Finnegan, puppet characters who lived in a treehouse. Casey was curious and enthusiastic. Finnegan was playful and loyal. Together with Mr. Dressup, they'd draw, sing, and play. What made the show special was Ernie Coombs himself. He was genuinely kind, genuinely creative, and genuinely interested in children. He never talked down to kids. He treated them with respect and warmth. When Ernie Coombs passed away in 2001, the entire country mourned. He'd been a constant presence in Canadian childhood for 3 decades. Mr. Dressup taught a generation of kids that creativity was a superpower and that kindness was cool, and we never forgot him. If you remember the tickle trunk, you had a good childhood. This show ran on CBC from 1958 to 1985, 27 years of the gentlest, most comforting television ever made. Every episode started the same way. The drawbridge would come down. The friendly giant would look down at the camera and say, "Look up, look way up, and I'll call Rusty." Rusty the rooster would appear in the window. Jerome the giraffe would poke his head through the other window. And for 15 minutes, you were in the safest place on television. There were no villains, no conflict, no lessons being hammered into your head. Just a giant, his animal friends, some music, and an atmosphere of pure kindness. He treated children like they mattered, like their time was valuable. The friendly giant never changed. For 27 years, it was exactly the same, and that consistency was the point. In a chaotic world, this show was a constant, reliable, gentle, and kind. When Bob Hom passed away in 2000, a generation of Canadians mourned the loss of a friend. The friendly giant defined Canadian children's television. It set the standard for what kids' programming could be. Not loud or flashy, but warm and respectful. If Look Up, Look Way Up still gives you chills, you know. This was the greatest Canadian kids show ever made. Drop a comment and tell me, how many of these 10 shows did you watch? Which one was your favorite? And which show do you think should have been on this list? If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're covering Canadian TV nostalgia every week, and part 6 is coming soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.